Hello and welcome to the 15th lecture recap for CIMA P3 Performance Strategy. This lecture is on control of information. First of all, what risks are involved in holding and using information? Well, you've got the security of that information to think about. You've got the hardware theft which could occur, physical damage either through malicious damage, poor conditions or potentially some sort of disaster. Data damage through hackers or viruses, or some sort of operational mistake, maybe someone deleting files by mistake. And lastly, you've got fraud and espionage to think about. Using the internet or intranet, well, there may be just simply too many emails, taking up too much time and too much space. Also, sometimes when emails are sent, there's an unintentional meaning, that when things are written down it doesn't come across as if it was spoken. Employees spending too much time on the internet, I'm sure you don't do this, but some employees do spend too much time on the internet and not enough time working. And also we've got those hackers and viruses that we were talking about. So what controls can we have in place to circumvent these risks? Well, access controls. These will be things such as user IDs, passwords, authorization. Problems with this? Well, mostly surrounding passwords. People may divulge their passwords to work colleagues or friends. The password may be easy to guess, or it may simply be written down very near to the computer station. All of these though will create an access log so that you'll be able to see who has been accessing the system and using what information. Facility controls. These are controls surrounding the actual physical facility. So physical access, first of all, you'll want to have security guards, identification cards for entry, also safes to secure any information that's very important, CCTV and alarms. Those are all controls over physical access. Procedures to follow. Well, you should store all disks securely, don't leave them lying around on desks, and shred all of important documents that are to be thrown out. You also should have a disaster recovery plan and system backups. Applications. Now these have to be correctly input, processed and maintained. Okay, so these are application controls and they ensure that information is correctly input, processed and maintained. They will be specific to the application. For example, Sage software will have specific controls over the input, processing and maintenance of the data. Software controls, well, these will be to ensure that you're using legally held software. You should always use reputable dealers to get your software, use original disks and check the licenses to make sure that you're using legal software. Some more controls then. For example, over networks, you should have firewalls, flow controls, and flow controls are simply where you have confidential lines where some information is available to others and stopped from being available to some parties. You'll have data encryption and you'll have virus protection. All of these are network controls. Which brings us on to the Data Protection Act, which if you're holding any data is very important to the business. So why do we have it? Well, these days it's very easy to move large volumes of data around. You also have many linked records and it's easy to find data. You don't have to search through it. A simple typed search will find any data that you need it. So under the Data Protection Act you have to register if you intend to hold data. You need to give the name and address of the user, i.e. who's going to use the data. You need to describe what data you're holding, who it's disclosed to, and if there's any non-UK distribution. And lastly, the name of the person responsible for holding that data. The principles are that the data should be obtained fairly. It should only be held for specific purposes. You can't just hold data for general purposes. It shouldn't be excessive. You shouldn't hold excessive amounts of data on people. It shouldn't be disclosed to third parties, and it should all be accurate. There are some exemptions to the Data Protection Act. They'll be things such as law enforcement, HMRC, statistical research and legal privilege. All of these are exempt from the Data Protection Act. So systems and audit then, how do we control all of this information and make sure the system is developing properly? Well, in systems development, what we will have is new systems that must meet the requirements that we set down for them. So if you're developing a new system, it must meet the requirements that you've set down. Controls to ensure this, well, you'll have that steering committee to approve the outline. The design should be fully documented. The programming should be fully documented. There should be detailed testing undertaken. You should set a timetable for the system to be implemented, and that implementation should be strongly controlled. And at the end of it all, you should monitor everything that's done. Auditing systems. Well, the problems with this are the controls may all be in the IT department, i.e. not at the end user's station. You may lack primary records because it all goes through the computer. There may be a loss of an audit trail because, for example, the computer may not hold it sufficiently. And data may be overwritten, which can be a problem for trying to audit. So the approach, how do you approach undertaking an audit of computer systems? Well, you can either go around the computer, and this means you basically match the inputs to the outputs, so it's very simple. It's rather than actually looking at the processes within the computer, you put the inputs into the computer and match them to the outputs to make sure that it conforms to what you expected. However, you're not going to be testing the files within the computer, which is a problem. If there's errors, you may not understand why there are errors because you haven't taken a good look at the actual processes within the computer. And if there are any discrepancies at all, they must be resolved, otherwise you won't understand why they have occurred. If you're going through the computer, you'll probably use computer-aided audit techniques. This will be software specifically designed to audit the system, or you may use test data, i.e. print and test data, and use it to do various audit tests. And these will be testing the various processes within the system, and we'll look in more detail at computer-aided audit techniques shortly. Okay, so that was our lecture on controlling information.